Okay, so we've got a beautiful rose here, and I've just gone for the one that's kind of orangey, just because it's a different colour than we normally do. We've done quite a few pinks and things in the past, but by all means, if you want to do the pinks, absolutely fine. You can apply everything that we're going to talk about to doing a pink rose. One of the big things, obviously, with watercolour is just deciding how you want to go with it. So, you know, you can have watercolours that are very tight, where they're very carefully drawn in, every leaf is drawn in, etc. And that's absolutely fine. Some people love that really like detail, popping all the tiny details, especially if they're working sometimes with watercolour pencils, because you can get more into those. Or you can go really loose, where you hardly put any lines down to start with at all. So that is entirely down to you and up to you. Sometimes we don't know how much we like something to be loose until we actually do it. So sometimes I would say, you know, have a go at being loose first on your little bit of paper, because, you know, you might think, oh, I really love it, and then other times you might think you're not. So you might, and then there's everything in between, so you might have a little bit of structure to it, so you just know where the kind of leaves are going to go a bit, and have a little bit of a drawing, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going midway between, really. I'm going to keep some things loose, but I'm just going to have just a bit of a plan, so I know. But I'm going to keep it looser than I normally do, just because it's nice to have a change. And sometimes, even if you like to do things nice and tightly, sometimes you think, oh, I'll just try a little bit. One of the biggest things, obviously, is making sure you reserve the lightest areas. So most of the time we work light to dark with watercolour, so that we do that. With, say, this particular picture, what you can do is work in the shadows to get the line of all of the petals, especially if you've got a huge mass like this one where there's loads. Sometimes people find it easier to do like the negative space again, and like actually start to pop in, because what you're not doing, you're not going over the light areas, you're just using the darker shadows of the negative spaces to be able to actually get the shape of your leaf. So that's another option to do that, especially when it's really thick. This shouldn't be too bad, because it's not like a really heavy rose with loads and loads and loads and loads of petals, like some of the some of the bush roses, which can be really fancy. So yeah, so reserving these areas of light so we don't go into them. The other thing you can do is always have my tissue there somewhere. Always have like a tissue handy, so that you can just blot out as well very quickly, but you'll have to work quite fast, especially if it's warm in your room. Okay, so what have we got then? So this one, so again, the other decisions that you might want to make is about the background. So if you're doing a background that's this dark, then you are going to need to keep that rose a little bit separate, otherwise we won't be able to cover the very dark background with the light. You might want to make it a bit lighter, but even so, you need to leave space for your light colours so that they do not bleed in with the green and get all muddy. So background is definitely one to think about. I'm going to go without background tonight, just because I really want to pick up all the beauty of these of the flowers without having the background in. But by all means, if you want to pop a background in, you know, you can add some colours. For example, let's have a little look. I just got my brush. Well, I've got pan watercolours today. So say I was going to go a bit lighter, I'm just going to test. I am going to do a lot of testing, by the way, as usual, just test out the colours that I want. So with the pan anyway, whatever we're doing, we can, so that's obviously going to be very more intense. We can water that down, so we can add more water to the pigment to make it much lighter in colour. You know, just a really small amount there, isn't there? Or we can add more pigment to make it darker. And you can even, you know, the one thing I'd say is having plenty of paint, so you've got enough to get the colours that you want. So say I was going to just try some greens, and as you can see, some of these look almost black when they're in the pan, so you can't really tell what they're like, which is hence the reason for testing. But say you did want a couple of greens, one a bit darker and one a bit lighter. I'm going to go in with this one over here. This is more of a blue green. We've got all these kind of tones to think about. When we're thinking about backgrounds, I wanted a more, this one's more of a sap green. But you can see already, can't you, when we're testing, we can get a much darker colour with more pigment on the tester paper over actually. You know, all these different tones that we're getting just from adding more water, less water, etc. Yeah, so we're just having a play really, and just a lot of this tonight is very experimental, because especially if you're going loose with your watercolors, that is experimental in itself. So I'll just move out that way, but I'm not going to put background in here because I don't want to pop it on. But if I was trying to get two colors, I would obviously just very briefly just kind of just leaving us enough of a space there for this rose so it doesn't go in there. And you do have to do that the same with your buds so it doesn't go in. But I would like just, you know, get some of these lighter shapes in. You know, if you're wanting to make it hazy, it's all right to kind of drop different colours in if they're the similar tones. So, you know, I'm just kind of popping in. I've got a nice big wide brush because these wide flats really kind of spread the paint about easily, so you don't get a lot of what people don't like is like the lines, you know, the edges. So if you're wanting to create this hazy kind of background around them, and then you want a darker colour in as well, then you can mix the two colours. You can drop them in, we can make them darker as well. So I'm here. So what you see here, because to make it hazy, I'm just kind of, I am dropping it in whilst it's still wet there. So you don't end up with like kind of a lot of linear marks. So you could do a background like that. As I said, I'm not going to do one like that today, but you can do if you fancy one. And I'm not making it really dark to start with either, because sometimes we can go in really dark and not actually know how dark we really want to go. So if you go in really dark and then you don't like it, you're a bit stuck with it really, pretty much. So you can see there, just to highlight, it's not quite as bad to let it run a little bit if you've got very similar tones. Obviously, if we've got, say, blues and yellows in there, that background, you'd have to be careful because you'd end up with green. But because we're using a variety of greens, it's actually okay, you know. So yeah, so it's just, and if it does dry and you think, oh, I ended up with a really hard edge now, then just add a little bit of water to it and kind of just, you know, get it moving. So that's, you know, you can get that background in before you do your flowers quite easily like that if you want to. And it's lovely. I think there's nothing nicer actually with coming back to watercolor than pushing these colors around your paper. It's absolutely lovely. So so if you wanted to do your background, that's absolutely fine, you can do that. Now I did say I was going to go some way between loose and having some marks made. Now some people absolutely love just to go in and they'll create some of that there, so I'll do it on here to just demonstrate what I mean. So I'm going like looking at this orangey color. What we have to think about is the tones of orange and everything. So again, you still need to test, because what you'll see is there's darker areas, there's lighter ones, there's ones that are more almost yellow. So testing is really important here. You know, the color that you want to kind of use. You know, do we want to use some of these, you know, so the other darker colors in the darker areas, or you might want to mix up your yellows. So it's just really a lot of it. There's a lot of testing, I think, because watercolor is one of those that just take quite a bit of kind of mixing. And then when you're happy with your colour, get loads mixed up so that you know what to do with it. So I'm just going to go in with this one. So if I wanted to go in and kind of start creating these leaves, but there's lighter areas, that's where I go in with my tissue straight away. So people work quite loosely, so they might kind of go without any drawing, that's fine. I've got this in, and then I can try and create this going over. But then straight away take out all of that light colour so that we've just, so you've still got that looseness of the leaf coming round. Now obviously there's only one area of this particular leaf is this one that I'm trying to replicate here, and then you can go in you know, with the next layer. So I'm just going to kind of just do the bottom of the rose here. Try and create that shape with it going backwards. And again, you know, I might want to just be a bit careful here. I might want to drop in a little bit of drop in a dark colour and let it run on purpose. So that a lot of people, when they're not doing any drawing on it, want to get this, create this real kind of where you get this running colour in here. There's a little bit of something going on that leaf around the outside here to create that frilly edge. So we're just building it up like that, and then you're taking out anything that's, you know, not light enough on at the time whilst it's going. There we go. So there's like just a little kind of frilly edge here. So we're just building, you know, and that's how we would build that up bit by bit. Some of these areas in, so this makes sense. I'm only doing, that's why I'm demonstrating it on here, because I'm not going to work like that on there. I'm going to work a bit differently. But you may want to work like this because a lot of people love it, the looseness of it. So I'm trying to get that next leaf in there. Again, I'm taking off the edge of the leaf with my bit of tissue so that I don't go over it. And also I can get the feel that it's lighter. This is lighter here. And then I can start to drop in some of these dark colours further down, you know, down by the base. Oh, this is lovely. You know, this is where we can start to darken things. So we've got, it's much looser, this one. So I've only got this bit, sorry, this bit in the middle, starting to get this petal out. So you can see, you know, what we're doing, just building that up. Okay, so obviously that's not finished. It would take me a while to demonstrate that, but I'm just saying that's how loose you can go in, and just kind of start to drop colours in until you've got this built up, you know, this picture of this rose on here. So that's really loose. I'm going to go somewhere mid between. If it feels a bit too like, when you go loose, there's no control, there's some control over it, but it's not as much control, and sometimes it does run where you might not want it, but it's lovely to do it as well. So even if you could even do two little sketches if you wanted to, and try one that's really loose and one that's not. What I'm going to do, so you could draw this whole rose out if you wanted lightly, of course. Got to be really careful so that it doesn't come through, because we've got some light areas. Again, I'm going to make mine a bit brighter, but I'm not going to put in as much as I normally do. So this is me midway between. So I'm kind of just going to make sure I've got some structure. I will make these darker though for you, the ones where I'm just putting, so it's a little bit more sketchy. Really, so I've got I can fit it in, and I know that I'm going to get the whole composition in a little bit. So there's that rose coming down the petal. Put this bit in the middle. Yeah, so this is kind of my mid sketch really, is to just get some of these details. just so I know that they're all going to get on the page and fit it all in. So my midway between is a kind of, it's a bit of a sketch really. So I've got this. I'm really just kind of trying to get make sure I've got the edge of the folds and things like that, edge of the petals. But yeah, I mean, you could be really, really precise if you wanted to be with that. But this to me is just getting enough on. Really, so I can reserve those white areas as well. The only problem with mine obviously will be that this dark area will show through as I'm pressing on so everyone can see, but that's not a problem for me. I'm not worried about it. Yeah, you have a little rubber at hand. So I've not done all of this in the middle, but I just wanted really to make sure I could get everything on the round today. Let's come out a little bit further. So there we go. So then we've got these lovely leaves that these lovely petals that kind of flow backwards. I'm going to pop them in, and then obviously just a bit loosely just so I can I'm not missing like the petals and things out. But again, you don't have to draw any of this. You can go in totally loosely, like I was just demoing there. Some of these like bits here coming out. Again, just to make sure I can get these buds in. Just beautiful, aren't they? Just love them. Just love rosebuds. Something really nice about a flower that's not actually opened yet as much as there is one that's opened. What we get obviously is we're going down, we can create, like with the shades, we can create that shadow going down, which gives us a bit of depth as well, which is nice. And then all these different colours in there when you start to look, there's lots. Yeah, so I'm just, as I said, it's quite sketchy. I'm not really being really that precise. I just want to make sure I can kind of get the main bits of the bud and everything in. And then I will kind of get a bit nice and loose when I'm in there. Beauty of the buds are that you get all very similar shapes. So once you've done one, you start to get quite familiar with the shape in there, which is lovely. You get to see them all different angles. Yeah. There we go. Yeah, still quite sketchy, but just getting enough in that I know. Right, there we go. Okay. So what we're really thinking about is the different tones and things, as well as making sure we reserve the areas of light. So I'm just going to go straight in and go in for this, go in for the rose. So I've already obviously started to think about some colours with the little swatch here. So I'm just going to pull that down and get everything out one mixed up and ready, including a lighter one. So just make sure that your water's nice and clean as well. I know it's an obvious one, but sometimes we can end up getting, you know, kind of bluey colours mixed in when we don't want them and that kind of thing. So I'm getting plenty mixed up there. I'm even going to get some that are mixed up and watered down at the side. Now, again, so the drying time is quite interesting because sometimes we want some of the darker colours to bleed into it and sometimes we don't. So again, that's something to work out. You know, do I want these colours to bleed together? If not, I need to allow a little bit more drying time. So I'm going to go in with a nice contrasting colour. It's almost a bit pinky purple, actually, not pinky colour in places. So I'm just going to go with that. Get ready that one. We'll put a bit of alizarin in. So we're just playing, aren't we, with all these colours and tones that we can see really, but again, we all see things differently. So let's move that out of the way. Okay, so because we've got each petal independent, you know, that's when we can just kind of start to, unless you're taking colours out quickly, then you can start to kind of build them up. So I'm going to start here around this outside where it's much lighter there. Right, build up some of these lovely colours. But again, you know, I'm just going to take some out while it's still quite wet. And this is quite wet. I've really loaded it up quite a lot. It's a little bit lighter there. A bit lighter there. So, you know, you may end up also just adding a little bit more on as you go. Making it, you know, making some of these areas dark. I know it does almost make a bit of a, kind of spreads out a little bit the colour there, which is nice. And I might just make that colour bleed a little bit so it does kind of go into the other colours, because it's that velvety feel we get on some of the roses does feel like it's the colour spreading. So I'm going to try and replicate what we do find a little bit in nature there. You know, when you see these lighter areas kind of on the edge as well. So yes, I'm just working through each of these areas. I'm leaving that so I can come back and add some different darker colours, but it's very wet at the moment, so it does need some drying time. Just enjoy working my way through it, lovely. Darker colour in that one as well. Now, if it's really wet and it's too wet for you, you can always take a little bit of that colour back out with a brush or a tissue. Yeah, so just working your way through. So this bit here, obviously there's things you can think about, like the depth in the middle. You can make that a little bit, you know, a deeper colour if it feels, to help it feel like it goes in, if you want to make it a bit more of an intense colour even. So I'm just looking at where these come round here. Or you can just keep working until you reach the middle, you know, so you've got all the ones around the outside. It's entirely up to you. I'm just folding these up a little bit. And again, sometimes it doesn't look like the finished article till you get near the end and you're starting to pop in like those darker shadowy areas. So it can look a little bit kind of, you know, a mixture. That's all right. So I'm just dabbing out some of the colour and the tone. So just keep adding the layers. So don't be alarmed either. It may look, you know, a lot looser than you're used to. So it's just waiting, just kind of waiting till the end where we get a little bit more finished. And then it will all come right. And sometimes it doesn't with watercolour, but that's fine as well. So, you know, you can always thin them right down if it's not kind of doing exactly what you want it to. Make those colours a bit more translucent. And watery, you know, which is, you know, what people really, really enjoy about watercolours is that they can do that and make those colours really really neutral, really kind of watery effect. Really relaxing though, very relaxing process is this. Okay. And then when when you're at a point where you can overlay some dark colours, and you're happy with them in case it bleeds or whatever, just add them in. Keep going. We're just building this up step by step, really, even though it's quite loose. Just adding the next layer of colouring. That you're happy with it. Sometimes the contrast isn't quite as strong enough as you want, so you can just add a little bit more. And it moves as well. If it's really wet, it will move a little bit. So sometimes you want to perhaps add a little bit more in because it's moved. Now obviously some of it's coming through the pencil. And I could have rubbed it out, but that's fine. Yeah, so we're just building up these layers between, aren't we, so we can see where where they're coming. So I'm going to pop this whole petal in, which is lighter, draw it in first, or kind of paint it in first, and then take out the light area of it, which is on the tip. And then just darken around it. And I'll have to do some of that later when it's a bit more dry. As when you're doing the centers of things, it's just about making the shape that you can see, and leaving a little line between it. It's all going to get into one kind of which it does sometimes, into kind of a big muff if we're not careful. You can just leave a little line between each of the sections to remind yourself to put your shadow in or whatever. And then we get these bright highlights sometimes from the light shining on the tops. Okay, well, I'm going to let mine dry for the moment because I don't want to pop anything else just in for the minute in the rose. Take a pause and see how you're all getting on before I add on some more darker bits. Okay, so I've had a little bit of drying time in between there, so I'm going to start to pop a little bit more dark on there because I think, yeah, it's pretty much dry now. It's a little bit down, but not much. I just want to get a little bit of structure in there because it feels like it's loose, which I want, but I also want a little bit of just a bit of structure. So I've got a little bit of alizarin crimson and a bit of red in here actually, just because I think that's what's going on with those buds. So I'm just going to kind of go in where I can see these really dark shadows between, and that will help me create a little bit of create a little bit of shape basically. So if it starts getting too angular, I'll just soften it down a little bit and just make it kind of a bit looser. Now you can obviously do this while it's a little slightly bit more damp and get it to kind of bleed in a bit, but I'm just gonna, I don't want it too loose, but I don't want it too tight either. You do get what you do get where people say, oh, you know, it's so loose, I've lost all the structure to it, especially if you're used to, you know, popping in a bit more detail. It can seem like it's a bit wild. So, but you can do exactly the same as we would, like, for example, you can see on some here, you can actually see a shadow underneath because these leaves, these petals do cast a little bit of a shadow underneath them. So if you have like a frilly edge or whatever, and you want to get that on, you know, in a darker color or whatever, then just follow what you can see on your piece, and it just puts a little bit of structure back into your painting, so you can have it kind of loose, and it also just helps you see what's going on. You do often get these shadows cast behind the leaves. Or sometimes in front of them as well. So look at these kind of darker areas that are kind of caught up inside this area here, for example. Just start to pop really dark ones in, like the middle of the centre of the flower there. You can see that right in the middle there. So we're just kind of, I like to just pop a little bit of definition back into the middle so we can see, especially when it's such a hodgepodge of leaves, you know, we actually can get lost ourselves in it, can't we, trying to find, you know, where these little edges are and things. Don't be frightened of popping in those shadows that the leaves cast under, you know, over the top of another leaf. That's what we see quite often. Thank you, then. Yeah, I mean, you can even add some more depth with some colours as well. Yeah, so we just kind of, you know, just adding a little bit of, just a little bit of definition there if you want to. Darken up anything else that you think, actually, I really want to make that darker now. So we're not going in straight away. Unless you know you really like bold colour, and that's fine. But that also helps to create, you know, some kind of depth to our painting as well. Like down the bottom, you might get a little bit more. There we go, and I'll probably just pretty much leave that as it is, because it's how it all looks together as a whole. We can easily just really kind of overpick with some of these paintings that we've got, like they're just on the head on its own, but it's what it looks like when it's together with everything else that's important. There's a leaf down here that I've actually forgotten to do, so I'm just going to pop some bits on that. Just not going to get too overly concerned with it. And we get some dark greens between and everything, and then there's all these lovely, interesting colours underneath it. Yeah. And green colour, whatever it is you think you want to pop in there. Brown colour. I've just got green in, but then it's kind of, we've got some nice yellowy ones. You might just need to be careful how you drop those in there around the greens and things like that. It's very dark under there and the shadow under here. I'm going to go in with that bit later on, just going to mark it one. And then again, in between, I want to pop, like, get some of the shape of rose by putting this green shadow in where all of the greens are coming in, which I can't really do at the moment. So again, when we're starting to look at some of these other colours, we're looking at the light ones, the dark ones, and then the other colours in between. So the greens, you know, you might want to go, it depends what colour green you want to go for, whether it's is it a bluey green, is it a sap green? And then there's some other colours to consider as well. And again, if you're not sure the depth of the colour it's going to make, whether it's right, and if it's not right, you might want to warm it up. So obviously you can add some yellowy colours, tones, if you want it to be more yellowy. Look at this here. I want that more yellow. It's too, what's this one? It's more sap green. Yeah, it's more sap green. I'm happy with that. It's got more of a warm tone to it. That's a bit better. But I'm going to have that mixed, the green I've just mixed up there, alongside some of these other colours that you get in there. Like with almost, I can see some pinky colours, but again, this just entirely on. Have a look at what you can see on yours. You may even get some like a tinge of a yellowy colour. So I'm just going to build, say, this little leaf up here, which has got quite a light colour, just right through the middle. So you might want to go, go smaller too. But again, if I don't want it to run into each other, I'm going to have to make sure that I leave a bit of drying time. And just keep popping on these colours that you've got. We can dark, we can always go dark, but we can't necessarily go lighter, so that's just the one to think about, really. So again, I'm just leaving a little bit out here so that for it to dry, so I can pop other bits and pieces in. But what I am going to do is I want to take a line out of there, out of the middle. So I'm just going to do that whilst it's wet. Try and just get a bit either side. Might have to darken that after, I think. So this is why often it looks a bit, when we're trying to do it, we think it looks a bit strange. So I'm just going to add to a clean brush. See if I can get that line back out the middle there. I'm not going in with tissue because it's too wide. I'll pull that out and then I'll darken up each side of that when I can, when it's dried a little bit. And then I'm just going to stick with trying to get the other bits of the leaf and everything like that. I can see. So what have we got here? We've got this. These little leaves coming out here. And again, I'm not going to be able to get it off of the tissue, but I'm going to just create that nice light coloured line. I'm just taking it out with a bit of a clean brush. So it's slightly lighter. You might need to kind of work into it a little bit to get it out. And then there's obviously part of a leaf under there. So I'm just going to work through these colours with these leaves and keep popping them in. Just like a system, isn't it? Working through. I'm just trying to avoid the edge of that one. Taking out a tiny bit, slightly light in the middle. And then obviously as it's drying, you can then start to pop in the darks, but I'm just going to get this really light one here. So same colour, but just watered down. This one here. Yeah, that comes right out there. I forgot to notice that. Never mind. That's fine. Something coming down here, so I'll pop that in. It's a bit yellowy, so I'm just going to go and try and copy that tone that's coming down there, which is kind of a yellowy green. And then you're looking at these, sometimes even looking in the bulbs of the plants, some of them are a bit yellowy, aren't they? When you start to look at those. So just look at these colours. Sometimes they go a bit yellowy at the top, so you can always mix. That's what you can see, just mix in a tone similar to the one you can see at the top. And then it might get back to its normal thing, the green down the bottom area. And obviously there's some quite dark ones and there's some quite other colours. It's just amazing what you start to see when you're looking really at these. Really, really lovely colours in there. And you have, sometimes the bulb comes out underneath the flower there. And then it just starts to create more of a picture together. So you get these, these darker or more kind of pinky tones, don't you, sometimes with roses underneath. I'm actually going to pop in a bit of ochre in there. I'm going to have one side that's a bit kind of ochre-y. Get a bigger brush because I can move it easier on a bigger brush. This green's a bit ochre-y at the minute, and I will add some other tones into it, like the pinky ones that I can see, etc. This one. I add a little bit through these pinky tones. I'm not worried about those blending a bit. Yeah, quite dark, aren't they? Some of them have got like when you start looking around, there's some of them have got almost a bit brighter in there. So I'll probably put these alizarin crimsony colours in here on the darker side, but then I might put a couple of literally brights over the top there. So far, this has just being like lighter tones. So what I'd like to go in and do now is pop the darker ones in now it's drying. And I think that makes it feel a bit more like we've got some dimension. So certainly on here, to find a green, it's really dark. And if I haven't got one, I'll just make one. What's that? Oh my gosh, yeah, this is like a viridian, not a viridian green, but like really dark, like hooker's green or something. But you can always put a bit of brown in with it or something. So I want to kind of get in some of these colours now. And if you don't want to put them on really thickly, it gets very dark near the bottom, doesn't it? Really much darker there. And you can kind of just blend it a little bit so it's not making such a, feeling really, really dark, but you might want it to be. You might like that contrast. The bottom here. Quite dark. And then, we're looking under here as well. I'm going in with that really dark colour. I want this much darker shadow in here, so you can see how it sits in there. It's too strong. Just kind of take it out again a little bit, or move it a bit, move it down. Make the water a bit thinner. Tops of the leaves, wherever. And this is dependent on how much detail you want to get into as well, isn't it? You don't have to put all these in. Those. We'll make this darker still down here. It's really quite dark at the bottom, just there. So we've got, okay, so that's here, under that shadow, we've got quite a dark bit here. So we are just adding some depth with the shadow in there. So we can do that with all of those stems and everything. See if there's a real dark shadow down one side. What there is here. There's a real dark. I've got a really dark side. I'm going to have to darken some of these stems up anyway because they're not quite as dark as I want them. So I'm going to go now in with some more alizarin crimson with my green. I'm going to mix that in there. I'm even going to add a touch of orange because I think that's what I'm seeing. So this is, again, it's trial and error. It's what we see, what we think we see. So just some of that dark off. I'm gonna up my brush again, just so that it goes on a bit easier. Sometimes you go down such a small brush, it's just difficult to get it on. Move the colour around a bit easier with this bigger brush. And then I'm just going to go in with a little bright there, which sounds a strange thing to do, but actually just gives it a bit of a brightening up. Okay. So yeah, so we're just keeping working through there. So now obviously we'll start to look at popping in some of these lovely buds, because now it looks a bit odd when we haven't got the rest of the buds in. So we can start to drop, you know, you can make these drop the colours in if you want to, or you can just, you know, focus on you know, waiting for them to dry. I'll just demo this bit over here. So we're looking at the colours in there. We've got some quite dark ones and then some other lighter colours that are almost kind of this lovely orangey colour. So I'm going to try and get this orangey colour I had earlier and be able to use that in the really dark ones. And I'm going to have also a much darker version. So let's see what colour I can use for that. That's nice. This one's a bit brighter than an Alizarian crimson. It's fascinating how buds do this, how you think you know, how you think that they're going to be orange as they come out, but they're not, like totally different colour, aren't they? It's really interesting. So I'm just thinking about dropping colour. So I'm not necessarily going light to dark here because I know what I can avoid and what I can pop in. I'm just going to just start to create some of the shade. It's darker in this section. And again, this is just waiting for me to be patient with it drying. I can pop the other colours in and then make them, you know, some of the areas darker as well. Just finding a colour that you're happy with, I think. And this is quite bright in here, quite vibrant. So I'm going to go in with quite a bit of pigment into this area. And then I can add darker colour as we go. It's a bit more diffused in there. While I'm waiting for that one, put this back in here. I'm going to just go between there and I'm going to pop in this dark colour again. It's really dark, shadowy green. Just between here, I'm getting a sense of this is where the shadows can be quite effective in creating this lovely shape. And then there might be something slightly lighter in there, so you can pop another colour. some darker colours, you know, if you've got any other areas of depth that you want to pop in. Some of these are really dark, aren't they? So we're just kind of carrying on like this. I'm just going to pop in this bit of dark shadow even under here, and again this creates the shape and the colour around the rose as well. So don't be frightened of going in with these shadows. People just sometimes think it's got to be all watery, but actually it doesn't. Still do need to represent where we get, like in there, that's a bit lighter. So I can make that a bit lighter in there. But actually under here and around, there are some really quite dark areas. You know, between here. So this is sometimes where it starts to take a more of a shape because we're using the, you know, the shadows around there. Okay. So yeah, so I'm just going to see if it's dry enough to drop in this last colour, and then I might try and let that run a little bit in there as well. It does seem to blend a little bit, doesn't it? I might make it a bit lighter. Some other oranges that we want to pop in as well, but yeah, you can get the idea. We can just make that run in, and then we can also start popping if there's anything really dark on that rose as well. This is quite a dark area here. I'm just going to load my pigment up more heavily. Put that in there. Same here, there's a really dark patch there. Yeah. And don't be frightened of representing these very, very dark areas like that. So yeah, so we're just kind of darkening off things really at the end, I think. And then, you know, we've had another go at creating another study, really. If you've got anything that's kind of sticking up, you think you want it to go down, then, you know, adding a dark colour, so that bit's quite helpful as well. So you know, if you've got any stark bits that you need to soften as well, because you think, oh, actually, there's a bit of colour in that, it doesn't need to be bright white, then that we've avoided because we were worried about it. So there's a little bit in there that's a bit, I'm just going to pop a little bit of softness in there because it's a bit linear. Looks like I've drawn a line around it rather than the soft top of the rose. I'm just going to go in with a bit of a yellow colour. No, just to make it not quite so harsh. And then likewise, if you've got anything on that rose you think, I should have made that a bit darker, then again, by all means, just darken it off. It might be that we've got some, you know, some little areas that go between a a petal that we want to pop in, just to create the definition a bit more there. Deepen it, etc. That's it really. I mean, I'm going to leave mine there because it's just, you know, it's a little study that we've done, and I'm quite happy with just kind of leaving it as it is. Don't really want to put any more definition into it at the moment. I might come back to it and have a little look, but I'm quite happy with that. So I hope that's been helpful, and that'll be my last pause. See how you get on, and just learn really what kind of a style you like, you know, how loose, how tight, you know, what colours, etc. And that's great, and it just keep building up those little studies of different things, because everything, even with watercolour, you may well do in a different style anyway. To floral may be different to a house or a something else, so just try different things really. Hope you enjoyed it.